Welcome to our exploration of one of history's most misunderstood philosophical traditions, Stoicism. Today, we're diving deep into the myths surrounding Stoic philosophy, particularly those concerning emotions and happiness. If you've ever heard that Stoics advocate for emotional suppression or that they're merely resigned to a joyless existence, then this journey will be particularly illuminating. The word Stoic in everyday language has become synonymous with being emotionless, cold, and detached. Be stoic, people say, meaning don't show what you're feeling. But this popular understanding bears little resemblance to the rich philosophical tradition that began in Athens around 300 BCE with Zeno of Citium, and later flourished in Rome with figures like Seneca, Epictetus, and Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Let's begin with perhaps the most pervasive myth, that Stoics believe in suppressing all emotions. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics never advocated for emotional numbness. Instead, they made a crucial distinction that's often lost in modern interpretations, a distinction between reactive, destructive emotions and rational, constructive ones. The Stoics use the term path to describe unhealthy, excessive emotions that cloud judgment and lead to suffering. These include anger, fear, grief, and envy when they overwhelm us. But contrary to popular belief, they didn't suggest eliminating all emotional responses. Rather, they encouraged the cultivation of eupatheiai, good emotions or well-reasoned feelings that arise from accurate understanding and virtuous character. Consider Seneca, often portrayed as advocating emotional repression. In reality, he wrote extensively about joy, gaudium, caution, eulabeia, and wishing, boulesis, as appropriate emotional responses. In his work On Anger, Seneca doesn't argue that we should never feel displeasure at wrongdoing. He argues that blind rage is destructive and counterproductive. The difference is subtle but profound. Epictetus, another towering Stoic figure, taught that we should acknowledge our initial emotional reactions, what modern psychologists might call our first impressions, but not automatically assent to them. This isn't suppression, it's mindful engagement with our emotional lives. It's about pausing between stimulus and response to evaluate whether our emotional reaction aligns with reason and reality. Another pervasive myth concerns the Stoic view of happiness. Many believe that Stoicism promotes a grim acceptance of fate rather than genuine happiness. This mischaracterization stems from confusing the Stoic concept of apatheia, freedom from disturbing emotions, with apathy in the modern sense. For Stoics, true happiness, or eudaimonia, wasn't about accumulating pleasures or avoiding all pain. It was about living virtuously in accordance with nature and reason. They believed that genuine happiness comes from developing excellence of character, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, rather than from external circumstances. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his Meditations about finding joy in the present moment and in acting according to nature. He didn't counsel resignation, but resilience. The Stoic sage isn't someone who doesn't feel. They're someone whose feelings are appropriate to reality and who isn't enslaved by desires for things outside their control. This brings us to another crucial distinction in Stoic thought, the dichotomy of control. Stoics taught that we should focus our energy on what is up to us, primarily our judgments, intentions, and actions, while accepting what isn't under our control. This isn't passive resignation, but active engagement with life on realistic terms. The Stoics were, in many ways, early cognitive psychologists. They recognize that our emotions aren't simply caused by events themselves, but by our judgments about those events. As Epictetus famously said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This insight forms the foundation of modern cognitive behavioral therapy, showing how ahead of their time the Stoics truly were. So if Stoics don't suppress emotions and don't resign themselves to unhappiness, what do they actually believe? In the coming segments, we'll explore the authentic Stoic approach to emotional well-being, their sophisticated understanding of human psychology, and their practical techniques for living a fulfilled life, characterized by tranquility, joy, and moral purpose. The journey into true Stoicism reveals not a philosophy of emotional denial, but one of emotional intelligence, not a doctrine of mere acceptance, but a path to genuine flourishing through wisdom and virtue. Stay with us as we continue to unravel these myths and discover what the Stoics really thought about emotions and happiness. Having dispelled the myth that Stoics advocate for emotional suppression, let's delve deeper into their sophisticated understanding of our emotional landscape. The Stoics developed one of the ancient world's most nuanced psychological frameworks, one that continues to influence modern therapeutic approaches. The Stoics viewed emotions not as simple reflexes, but as complex cognitive processes involving judgment. For them, every emotion contains within it an evaluation, a belief about what is good or bad, beneficial or harmful. This insight is revolutionary, even by today's standards. When we feel anger, for instance, we're not just experiencing a raw feeling. We're making a judgment that someone has wronged us, and that this wrong deserves our indignation. Seneca explains this brilliantly in On Anger when he writes, "Anger is not just a simple movement, but a complex one. It is composed of the idea of having been wronged and the desire for revenge." This cognitive dimension of emotions means that by examining and refining our judgments, we can transform our emotional responses. Chrysippus, an early Stoic whose works survive only in fragments, described emotions as judgments or opinions. When we feel fear, we're judging something to be a genuine threat to our well-being. When we feel grief, we're judging a loss to be unbearable. The Stoics didn't say these feelings aren't real. They recognized their power. What they suggested instead was that many of these judgments contain errors that cause unnecessary suffering. Consider grief. The Stoics didn't believe we should feel nothing when losing someone we love. That would be inhuman. Instead, they suggested that excessive grief often contains the implicit judgment that I cannot live well without this person, or this loss has destroyed all possibility of my happiness. These are judgments we can question and gradually modify without dishonoring our love for the departed. Epictetus taught his students to practice a kind of emotional mindfulness. When you are struck by the impression of some pleasure, guard yourself against being carried away by it. Examine it, test it. This isn't emotional repression, it's emotional intelligence. It's about creating space between stimulus and response, a concept that Viktor Frankl would echo thousands of years later. The Stoics divided emotions into four main categories: pleasure, pain, desire, and fear. But crucially, they distinguish between irrational passions, pathei, that contain false judgments, and rational emotions, eupathei, based on correct understanding. This distinction is vital for grasping Stoic emotional theory. When a Stoic feels joy, chara, instead of pleasure, hedon, they're experiencing delight based on genuine good, like the satisfaction of acting virtuously. When they feel wish, boulesis, instead of craving, epithumia, they're experiencing rational desire aligned with what's truly beneficial. And when they feel caution, eulabeia, instead of fear, phobos, they're experiencing prudent concern rather than paralyzing dread. Marcus Aurelius demonstrates this transformed emotional perspective when he writes, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This isn't pessimism, it's preparation. By anticipating difficulties without being disturbed by them, he's practicing what modern psychologists call preemptive cognitive reappraisal. The Stoic sage, their ideal of the perfected human, isn't someone who feels nothing. Rather, they feel deeply, but appropriately. They experience profound joy and virtue, genuine caution toward real dangers, and rational wish for what is truly good. They love others deeply, but without the desperate clinging that turns love into a source of suffering. They feel gratitude for life's gifts without becoming attached to them. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's teacher, taught that we should welcome hardship as a means to develop virtue. This isn't masochism. It's recognizing that our emotional responses to challenges shape our character. The Stoics saw difficult emotions as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles to happiness. This understanding of emotions as judgments gives us tremendous freedom. If our distress comes not from events themselves, but from our opinions about them, then by refining those opinions, we can transform our emotional experience. This doesn't mean pretending that painful events aren't painful. It means finding the courage to face reality as it is while maintaining our inner tranquility. In our next segment, we'll explore the practical techniques the Stoics developed to cultivate this emotional wisdom, daily exercises and mental practices that anyone can use to develop greater emotional resilience while still experiencing the full richness of human feeling. We'll see how Stoic emotional practice isn't about becoming cold or detached, but about achieving genuine tranquility amid life's inevitable challenges. Now that we've explored the Stoic understanding of emotions as judgments, let's turn to the practical dimension of their philosophy. The Stoics weren't merely theorists. They developed a comprehensive system of daily practices designed to transform emotional responses and cultivate inner tranquility. These weren't abstract philosophical exercises, but practical tools for everyday life. As Epictetus reminded his students, these are the things philosophers should meditate on, these they should write about daily, and in these they should exercise themselves. The Stoics understood that emotional wisdom requires consistent practice, not just intellectual understanding. Perhaps the most fundamental Stoic practice is the discipline of assent, training ourselves to withhold automatic agreement from our initial impressions. When a challenging situation arises, our minds immediately generate judgments. This is terrible. I can't handle this. Or, this person has wronged me. The Stoics taught us to pause and examine these judgments before accepting them. Marcus Aurelius demonstrates this practice when he writes, "Today I escaped anxiety," or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. Notice how he corrects himself mid-thought, recognizing that anxiety isn't something that happens to us, but something we generate through our judgments. Another powerful Stoic practice is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. This isn't pessimism, but preparation. By mentally rehearsing potential challenges, we reduce their emotional impact when they occur. Seneca advised, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." Modern psychologists call this stress inoculation training, but the Stoics were practicing it 2,000 years ago. The morning preparation was a cornerstone of Stoic practice. Each day began with a period of reflection on potential challenges and the virtues needed to face them. As Epictetus taught, when you're about to undertake any action, remind yourself what kind of action it is. This mental preparation creates emotional readiness for whatever the day might bring. Equally important was the evening review, a time to reflect on the day's events and our responses to them. Seneca described this practice. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. This self-examination wasn't self-criticism, but an opportunity for growth and refinement. The Stoics also practiced the view from above, mentally stepping back to see events from a cosmic perspective. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself, "Look at the stars and see the eternity all around you." This practice doesn't diminish our human concerns but places them in proper context, reducing the emotional grip of trivial worries. For managing strong emotions in the moment, the Stoics recommended techniques remarkably similar to modern mindfulness. When feeling overwhelmed, they advised pausing to observe the physical sensations of the emotion without being carried away by it. Epictetus suggested, "Remember that what is insulting is not the person who abuses you or hits you, but the judgment about them that they are insulting." Physical practices were also part of Stoic training. Voluntary discomfort, like practicing with cold, hunger, or simple living, built emotional resilience. Musonius Rufus taught that by experiencing discomfort willingly, we become more capable of facing unwanted hardships with equanimity. This wasn't self-punishment, but practical training for life's inevitable difficulties. Contrary to another common misconception, Stoic practice wasn't solitary, but communal. Seneca's letters to Lucilius show how Stoics shared their struggles and insights with friends. They understood that emotional growth happens in relationship, not in isolation. As Seneca wrote, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility." The goal of these practices wasn't to eliminate emotions, but to transform them. Through consistent application, the Stoics believed we could gradually replace irrational passions with their rational counterparts, moving from fear to caution, from craving to wish, from pleasure to joy, and from distress to appropriate concern. These practices offer a path not to emotional numbness, but to emotional freedom. By training ourselves to respond rather than react, to examine our judgments rather than be ruled by them, we develop what the Stoics called apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but freedom from excessive passion. This state allows for deeper joy, more meaningful connections, and greater resilience in the face of life's challenges. In our next segment, we'll explore how this Stoic understanding of emotions relates to their concept of happiness, eudaimonia, and how their approach differs fundamentally from both hedonism and the modern pursuit of constant positivity. We'll see how the Stoic path offers a more sustainable and meaningful approach to well-being than many contemporary alternatives.